I was finalizing my year-end business reports when my brother Tyler burst through the front door of our family home on Christmas Eve, his face flushed with desperation and rage. The familiar sound of his heavy boots on the hardwood floor made my stomach tighten with dread. Without warning, he slammed my laptop shut so hard the screen cracked, his bloodshot eyes blazing with fury as he screamed that I needed to pay his $19,000 debt immediately. When I calmly refused explaining I wouldn't enable his destructive behavior anymore, Tyler's voice turned venomous. "You're absolutely useless without your money, Marcus." He snarled, spit flying from his lips. Before I could respond, our father Robert emerged from the kitchen, his expression stern and disapproving, as he glared at me with unmistakable disappointment. "Don't come back to this house until you fix this situation," he declared, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. The moment those words left my father's mouth, I felt something inside me shift. For 2 years, I had been documenting every single instance of financial abuse from my family, and this confrontation was exactly what I needed. I stood, slowly reached into my pocket, and dialed my accountant's number with steady fingers. "Thomas, everything's happening exactly as we expected," I said calmly into the phone, while Tyler and Robert watched in confusion. "Trigger the lock immediately." What my family didn't understand was that I had been preparing for this exact scenario since discovering the depth of their manipulation. My mother, Linda, had died 3 years ago from cancer, leaving me a substantial inheritance that included her life insurance policy, retirement savings, and the proceeds from selling her antique jewelry collection. The total amount was just over $200,000, money she had specifically earmarked for my future, because she trusted my judgment and financial responsibility. But Tyler had been systematically draining those funds through emotional manipulation and outright lies. It started small, $5,000 for what he claimed was a business opportunity that would make him financially independent. Then, $8,000 for supposed medical bills after a car accident that I later discovered never happened. Each time, Robert pressured me to help, invoking family loyalty and claiming that Linda would have wanted us to support each other. Tyler stood 6 feet 2 inches tall with broad shoulders from his construction work, but his once athletic frame had grown soft from years of poor choices. His dark brown hair was thinning at the crown, and deep lines around his green eyes revealed the stress of constantly living lies. At 32, he possessed a natural charisma that had always made him the favorite child, the one who could charm his way out of trouble with a smile and a convincing story. Robert, our 58-year-old father, worked as a foreman for Patterson Construction and had always been a man of rigid principles, except when it came to Tyler. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short in a military style, and his weathered hands showed decades of manual labor. After Linda's death, Robert seemed to lose his moral compass, perhaps because Tyler reminded him of his own rebellious youth. The lock I referenced was a sophisticated legal trust mechanism that my financial advisor Sarah Chen and lawyer David Park had helped me establish. Every dollar Tyler had taken was carefully tracked, every conversation recorded, and every forged document preserved as evidence. What looked like Marcus being a pushover was actually Marcus building an airtight legal case. "What did you just do?" Tyler demanded, his voice cracking with sudden uncertainty. His hands, which had been clenched into fists moments earlier, began trembling as he realized I wasn't reacting the way I usually did to his intimidation tactics. I pulled out my smartphone and showed him the screen where a recording app had been running for the past 20 minutes. "I documented everything you just said, including your admission that you believe I'm only valuable for my money, and your threat to continue demanding payments for your gambling debts." The color drained from Tyler's face as the implications hit him. Robert stepped forward, his voice rising with anger. "What kind of game are you playing, Marcus? This is your brother." "Exactly," I replied quietly. "This is my brother, who has stolen $47,000 from me over the past 2 years through lies, manipulation, and forged signatures. This is my father, who has pressured me to enable destructive behavior instead of encouraging accountability. And this is the family that just proved they only value me as an ATM. Tyler's phone buzzed, and I watched his face turn ashen as he read the text message. The look of panic in his eyes told me that Thomas had already begun implementing the financial protections we had put in place. Whatever Tyler had been planning beyond tonight's demand was about to become impossible. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler sank into Linda's old recliner, the brown leather creaking under his weight as the reality of his situation began to sink in. His hands shook as he set his phone on the coffee table, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine fear replace his usual arrogance. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "These people aren't just asking for money anymore, Marcus. They're threatening to hurt the family." Robert's expression shifted from anger to concern. "What people? What are you talking about?" "Tyler." I had been waiting for this admission. Through my investigation, I had discovered that Tyler's problems extended far beyond simple gambling addiction. He had gotten involved with underground betting operations that used intimidation and violence to collect debts. But what my family didn't know was how deep Tyler's deception actually ran. 6 months earlier, Tyler had forged my signature on a loan application for $15,000. When I discovered the unauthorized inquiry on my credit report, I didn't confront him directly. Instead, I contacted federal authorities and began working with Detective Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit. What we uncovered was a systematic pattern of identity theft that extended beyond just my family. Tyler had been stealing mail from my apartment mailbox, intercepting credit card statements and bank notices before I could see them. Using my personal information, he had applied for 4 different credit cards in my name and had been using them to make cash advances that went directly to his gambling debts. The total amount of fraudulent charges exceeded $23,000. But the most devastating discovery came when Detective Morrison traced Tyler's financial transactions. My brother had also been embezzling money from Robert's construction business, skimming funds from equipment purchases and creating fake vendor invoices to cover his tracks. Robert's company was on the verge of bankruptcy, and my father had no idea that Tyler was responsible. Emma Rodriguez, my girlfriend of 2 years, had been urging me to cut contact with my family completely. As a psychology graduate student, she recognized the manipulation tactics immediately and documented the emotional abuse I endured during family gatherings. Her dark brown eyes would fill with anger whenever I came home from these encounters, and her petite frame would tense with protective instincts. "They're using classic financial abuse strategies," Emma had explained after a particularly difficult Thanksgiving dinner. "Your father creates guilt about family loyalty, while Tyler escalates his demands. It's textbook manipulation, and you need to protect yourself legally before they destroy your future." Jessica Wright, Tyler's ex-wife, had reached out to me early in the process to warn me about his behavior. During their divorce proceedings, she discovered that Tyler had been hiding credit cards and taking cash advances to fund his gambling. She lost her house because Tyler had been forging her name on loan documents, and their marriage fell apart when she realized the extent of his lies. "He'll tell you whatever you want to hear," Jessica had warned me during our coffee meeting downtown. "But every promise is just buying time for the next scheme. I lost everything trying to save him from himself." My mother, Linda, had worked as a bank manager for 30 years and understood financial security in ways that Robert never appreciated. Before her cancer diagnosis, she had spent months organizing her estate and giving me detailed instructions about protecting inherited wealth. She specifically warned me about family members who might view inheritance as an entitlement rather than a gift. "Marcus, you have good judgment and strong principles," she had told me during her final weeks. "But Tyler has always taken the easy path, and your father enables that behavior because he feels guilty about Tyler's struggles. Promise me, you'll protect what I'm leaving you, not just for yourself, but for the family you'll build someday." Now, as Tyler sat trembling in her chair, I realized how perfectly she had prepared me for this exact situation. The inheritance hadn't just been money. It was a test of character and wisdom. Tyler's phone rang, and he stared at the screen with obvious terror before declining the call. "They know I was supposed to have the money tonight," he said, his voice breaking. "If I don't pay them soon, they're going to start hurting people I care about." "Who are they, Tyler?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer from Detective Morrison's investigation. "Vincent D'Angelo and his associates." Tyler admitted naming the same criminal organization that law enforcement had been investigating for months. "They run high-stakes poker games and sports betting operations. When I couldn't pay what I owed, they offered me a way to work off the debt by providing them with information about wealthy families." Robert staggered backward as the implications hit him. "Information about our family." Tyler nodded miserably. "They wanted details about Marcus's inheritance, our business accounts, property values, everything. They said if I could help them access enough money, they'd forgive what I owed and pay me a percentage of what they recovered." The room fell silent except for the ticking of Linda's antique grandfather clock. In that moment, I realized that my brother hadn't just been stealing from us. He had been setting us up for a much larger criminal operation. The $19,000 demand tonight was just the beginning of a scheme to completely drain our family's assets. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. "Team is in position. Is he ready to admit contact with D'Angelo organization?" I looked at Tyler, who was now crying openly as the weight of his choices crashed down on him. "The people you owe money to. They're not just going to take the $19,000 and leave us alone, are they?" Tyler shook his head slowly. "They want everything, Marcus. Your inheritance, Dad's business, the house, everything. And once they have it all—" His voice trailed off as he realized what he had been helping them plan. That was when we heard the sound of car doors slamming outside, and I knew that Detective Morrison's team had arrived exactly on schedule. The doorbell rang with the sharp, authoritative sound that immediately changes the atmosphere of any situation. Through the front window, I could see Detective Morrison's unmarked sedan parked behind a sheriff's department patrol car. Thomas, my accountant, stepped out of a third vehicle, accompanied by a woman in a dark business suit, who I recognized as Agent Patricia Wells from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Tyler's face went white as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. "Marcus, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of heavy footsteps approaching the front door. "I protected our family from a criminal organization that you helped target us," I replied calmly as I walked to open the door. Detective Morrison entered first, his tall, lean frame filling the doorway. His gray hair was cropped short, and his steel blue eyes immediately assessed the room with the practiced gaze of someone who had seen too many family betrayals. Behind him, Agent Wells carried a leather briefcase that I knew contained months of evidence we had carefully compiled together. "Good evening, gentlemen," Detective Morrison said, his voice professional, but not unkind. "Tyler Richardson, you're under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes." Tyler jumped to his feet, his face flushed with panic. "This is insane. Marcus set me up. He's my brother, and he's having me arrested on Christmas Eve." "Actually," Agent Wells interjected, opening her briefcase and removing a thick folder, "you set yourself up by committing federal crimes and involving your family with a dangerous criminal organization." She spread documents across the coffee table, copies of the forged loan applications, credit card statements showing unauthorized charges, bank records proving embezzlement from Robert's business, and photographs of Tyler meeting with known associates of Vincent D'Angelo's operation. Robert sank into the couch, his weathered hands covering his face as he stared at the evidence. "Tyler, please tell me this isn't real." "Mr. Richardson," Agent Wells addressed my father directly, "your son has stolen approximately $73,000 from your family over the past 2 years. $23,000 from Marcus through identity theft, $27,000 from your business accounts through embezzlement, and another $23,000 through various fraudulent schemes involving your late wife's estate." The sheriff's deputy, a stocky man named Officer Bradley, stepped forward with handcuffs. Tyler backed toward the kitchen, his eyes darting frantically between the exits as he realized escape was impossible. "You don't understand," Tyler pleaded, his voice rising to a near shout. "These people will kill all of us if I don't pay them. Vincent D'Angelo doesn't forgive debts, and he doesn't leave witnesses." "That's exactly why you're going into federal custody," Detective Morrison replied. "Your cooperation with our investigation is the only thing that's going to keep your family safe." Tyler's desperation transformed into rage as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. He turned toward me with an expression of pure hatred. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Marcus? You think this ends here. You have no idea what you've just done to our family." "What I've done," I said quietly, "is stop you from getting us all killed while helping law enforcement dismantle a criminal organization that has destroyed dozens of families." Thomas stepped forward with additional documents. "Mr. Richardson, I need to inform you that your business accounts show irregularities dating back 14 months. Your son has been intercepting payments from clients and creating false invoices to cover the missing funds." Robert's face crumpled as he absorbed this information. "The Hendricks job, the Morrison contract. Tyler handled those payments directly." His voice trailed off as he realized how completely he had been deceived. "Your business is currently $78,000 in debt." Thomas continued gently. "Several suppliers have filed liens against your equipment, and the bank has begun foreclosure proceedings on your commercial property. I'm afraid Tyler intercepted those legal notices as well." Officer Bradley guided Tyler toward the door, but my brother stopped and turned back one final time. "You want to know the truth? Marcus Vincent's people have been watching this house for weeks. They know Emma's schedule. They know where Dad works. They know everything about all of us. Arresting me doesn't change any of that." Agent Wells exchanged a meaningful look with Detective Morrison. "Actually, it changes everything. Vincent D'Angelo and 6 members of his organization were arrested simultaneously tonight in coordinated raids across 3 states. Your family was never just Tyler's target. You were part of a much larger criminal enterprise." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Tyler stared at her in shock, his mouth opening and closing without sound as he processed what she had just revealed. "The gambling debts were real," Agent Wells continued, "but they were also a recruitment tool. D'Angelo's organization specifically targets people with gambling problems who have access to wealthy family members. They create artificial debt crises to force cooperation, then systematically drain the family's assets before disappearing." Robert stood up slowly, his legs unsteady, as he walked to the window and watched Tyler being placed in the back of the patrol car. "How many families has this happened to?" 37 that we know of," Detective Morrison replied. "Total losses exceed $2 million. Your family's case provided the evidence we needed to trace the entire network." Thomas opened his own briefcase and removed a different set of documents. "Marcus, the trust protections we established have preserved your inheritance completely. Additionally, the federal government will be seizing assets from the criminal organization to provide restitution for victims. Based on what they've recovered so far, your father's business should be able to recover most of the stolen funds." I watched through the window as the patrol car pulled away, with Tyler inside his face, pressed against the glass in a final desperate look at the home he had betrayed. The relief I expected to feel was tempered by sadness for the brother I remembered from childhood before addiction, and poor choices had transformed him into someone unrecognizable. Agent Wells gathered her papers and prepared to leave. "We'll need detailed statements from both of you over the next few days, but the immediate danger to your family has been eliminated. Tyler will likely face 5 to 8 years in federal prison, but his cooperation tonight will be considered during sentencing." After the law enforcement officers left, Robert and I sat in silence for several minutes. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly in the corner, creating an almost surreal contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. "Marcus," Robert said finally, his voice heavy with regret, "I owe you an apology that I don't know how to give. I failed as a father, and I failed to protect you from your own brother." But even as we tried to process what had happened, I knew this was only the beginning of a much larger revelation that would completely transform how we understood Tyler's betrayal. The next morning brought a phone call that changed everything we thought we knew about the situation. Robert was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had grown cold hours earlier, when Detective Morrison called with information that left us both stunned into silence. "We've completed our initial analysis of the seized computers and financial records from Vincent D'Angelo's operation," the detective explained over speakerphone. Tyler's involvement was more extensive than even he probably realized. Agent Wells had arrived at our house within an hour, carrying new evidence that painted a picture far more disturbing than simple financial fraud. She spread photographs and documents across the kitchen table, while Robert and I listened in growing horror. "Tyler wasn't just providing information about your family's assets," she began. "He was being trained to systematically drain both your inheritance and your father's business as part of a sophisticated long-term operation." The documents revealed detailed plans spanning several months. Tyler had been meeting with Vincent D'Angelo's financial specialists, learning techniques for accessing retirement accounts, manipulating business contracts, and even exploiting life insurance policies. The organization had identified our family as a particularly valuable target because of the combination of Marcus's liquid inheritance and Robert's established business relationships. "They call it family harvesting," Agent Wells explained. "They identify vulnerable family members with addiction issues, then train them to become inside sources for financial exploitation." Tyler underwent 6 weeks of training on how to manipulate family relationships and create artificial emergencies to justify large financial requests. Robert's hands trembled as he examined photocopies of Tyler's training materials. The documents included psychological profiles of both Robert and me, analyzing our emotional triggers and suggesting specific manipulation strategies tailored to our personalities. "According to this," Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper, "they knew I would pressure Marcus to help Tyler because I felt guilty about favoring him growing up." The psychological analysis was disturbingly accurate. It noted Robert's tendency to enable Tyler's behavior as a form of compensation for his own absent parenting during Tyler's teenage years. It identified Marcus as the financial resource, but noted his strong sense of family loyalty as both an asset to be exploited and a potential obstacle requiring careful management. They had a timeline. Agent Wells continued, pointing to a calendar marked with specific milestones. "Tyler was supposed to gain access to your business bank account information by October, Marcus's investment portfolio, details by November, and complete authorization to access both estates by January." The ultimate goal was staggering in its scope. The criminal organization planned to drain approximately $400,000 in total assets, including liquidating Robert's business, accessing Marcus's inheritance, and claiming death benefits from Linda's remaining insurance policies through fraudulent beneficiary changes. "Death benefits?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Agent Wells exchanged a meaningful look with Detective Morrison before answering. "Tyler provided them with copies of your mother's death certificate and insurance policies. They were preparing to file fraudulent claims suggesting that both you and your father had died in an accident with Tyler as the sole surviving beneficiary." The room fell silent as the horrifying implications sank in. Robert's face turned ashen as he realized how close we had come to something far worse than financial ruin. "They were planning to kill us," Robert said, his voice flat with shock. "The evidence suggests they were preparing for that possibility," Detective Morrison confirmed. "We found detailed surveillance reports about your daily routines, workplace schedules, and travel patterns. There are also discussions about staging accidents that would appear to be work-related incidents." Agent Wells opened another folder containing photographs taken with telephoto lenses. Pictures of me leaving my apartment, Robert at construction sites, Emma walking to her graduate school classes, even shots of Jessica visiting her children at school. The criminal organization had been studying our entire extended family network for months. Tyler's cooperation with their operation put everyone you care about at serious risk, she continued. But his decision to escalate demands last night actually saved your lives by forcing law enforcement intervention before the organization could implement the final phase of their plan. Robert stood and walked to the window, his shoulders shaking, as the full weight of Tyler's betrayal crashed over him. My son was helping people plan to murder his own family. We don't believe Tyler fully understood that aspect of the operation, Detective Morrison said gently. The organization compartmentalizes information to maintain control over their inside sources. Tyler knew about the financial fraud, but probably didn't realize the ultimate scope of their intentions. Agent Wells pulled out transcripts of recorded conversations between Tyler and his criminal contacts. Reading them revealed a pattern of gradually increasing demands and threats, with Tyler becoming more desperate and less questioning as the pressure intensified. They used classic techniques to maintain control, she explained. Starting with small requests, gradually increasing stakes using Tyler's gambling addiction as both motivation and justification, and finally threatening his family to ensure compliance. The transcripts showed Tyler expressing concern about involving Marcus and Robert in illegal activities, but his objections were systematically overcome through a combination of financial pressure and threats of violence. By the time he realized the true scope of what he was participating in, Tyler was too deeply involved to extricate himself safely. The $19,000 demand last night wasn't about gambling debts, Agent Wells revealed. It was a test to see if Tyler could successfully manipulate you into providing large sums of cash on demand. If you had paid, it would have confirmed to the organization that you were ready for the final phase of asset extraction. Robert returned to the table and picked up one of the psychological profiles. It says here that Tyler felt worthless compared to Marcus and was susceptible to offers that would make him feel important and valued. The profile was brutally accurate in its assessment of Tyler's emotional vulnerabilities. It described his resentment toward Marcus's academic and financial success, his guilt over disappointing Robert repeatedly, and his desperate need to prove his worth to the family. The criminal organization had identified these insecurities and crafted their recruitment strategy specifically to exploit them. Tyler wasn't just a victim, or just a perpetrator, Agent Wells explained. He was both. The organization preyed on his addiction and emotional issues, but his choices still put your family in mortal danger. Detective Morrison gathered the photographs and documents. We'll need these for the federal prosecution, but I wanted you to understand the full scope of what Marcus's investigation prevented. This wasn't just about protecting your inheritance. It was about protecting your lives. As the law enforcement officers prepared to leave, Agent Wells handed me a business card. The U.S. Attorney's Office will likely want your testimony for the criminal trials. Your cooperation made this entire investigation possible. After they left, Robert and I sat in the kitchen as morning sunlight streamed through the windows. The contrast between the peaceful Christmas morning and the horrific revelations we had just received seemed impossible to reconcile. Marcus, Robert said quietly, I don't understand how you had the strength to go through with this investigation, knowing how dangerous these people were. Because, I replied, thinking of Linda's final words about protecting the family. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is nothing at all. But even as we tried to process the magnitude of what had been revealed, neither of us was prepared for what we would discover when we visited Tyler in Federal Detention Center. 3 days later, against the advice of both Emma and Detective Morrison, I decided to visit Tyler in the Federal Detention Center. Robert chose to accompany me, though his hands shook as we walked through the security checkpoints and surrendered our personal belongings to the corrections officers. The visiting room was sterile and fluorescent lit, with plastic chairs arranged around small metal tables. Tyler appeared wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed to emphasize how much weight he had lost in just 72 hours. His eyes were bloodshot and hollow, and his usually confident demeanor had been replaced by something that looked like genuine terror. "I didn't think you would come," Tyler said quietly, as we sat across from him. His voice lacked the manipulative charm that had characterized our interactions for years. "We came because you're still our family," Robert replied, though his tone remained guarded. "But we need to understand how deep this goes, Tyler." Tyler stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. "Vincent D'Angelo's people found me 8 months ago at the casino downtown. I thought I was just getting lucky when this guy started buying me drinks and offering tips on games. He seemed genuinely interested in helping me win." What Tyler described was a sophisticated recruitment process that began with seemingly innocent friendship. Vincent's associate, a man named Carlos Mendez, had spent weeks gaining Tyler's trust by providing gambling tips that actually worked, creating the impression that Tyler had finally found someone who believed in his potential. "Carlos made me feel like I was smart for the first time in years," Tyler continued. "He said I had natural instincts for reading people and situations. When he offered me a way to make real money by providing information about wealthy families, it felt like legitimate consulting work." The criminal organization had presented the scheme as a form of financial planning service, claiming they helped families optimize their asset management through strategic restructuring. Tyler's role was supposedly to identify families who could benefit from their services and facilitate initial contact. "They never called it fraud or theft," Tyler explained. "Carlos said we were helping families access financial opportunities they didn't know existed. He showed me case studies of other families who had supposedly benefited from their services." Agent Wells had warned us that criminal organizations used elaborate justification systems to maintain control over their inside sources. By presenting illegal activities as legitimate business opportunities, they reduced resistance and enabled recruits to rationalize their participation. "When did you realize what you were actually doing?" I asked. Tyler's composure cracked, and tears began flowing down his cheeks. "About 6 weeks ago, when Carlos started asking for specific information about your investment accounts and Dad's business insurance policies. The questions became too detailed and too personal for any legitimate financial service." He described a gradual escalation that transformed legitimate-seeming requests into obviously criminal activities. First, Carlos asked for basic information about family income and assets. Then, he requested copies of bank statements and investment portfolios. Finally, he demanded access to account numbers, social security information, and legal documents. "I tried to pull back when I realized what was happening," Tyler said. "But by then, I owed them money for gambling losses they had encouraged, and they knew too much about our family to let me walk away safely." Robert leaned forward, his voice heavy with pain. "Why didn't you come to us when you realized the danger?" "Because I was ashamed," Tyler replied simply. "I had already stolen so much money from both of you that I couldn't bear to admit I had made everything worse by involving criminals. I thought I could find a way to pay them off and make everything disappear without you ever knowing." Tyler pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a letter he had written but never sent. In it, he detailed his growing awareness of the criminal organization's true intentions and his desperate attempts to extricate himself from their control. 3 weeks ago, Carlos introduced me to Vincent D'Angelo directly," Tyler continued. "Vincent told me the truth about what they were planning. He said families like ours were resource pools that could be completely drained if managed properly." Tyler's voice dropped to a whisper as he described the meeting with Vincent D'Angelo. The criminal leader had explained their family harvesting operation with cold efficiency, detailing how they had successfully destroyed 37 families over the past 3 years. Vincent said that once they had access to all our assets, they would need to eliminate witnesses who could identify their methods. Tyler said, his entire body shaking. He told me that successful operations required clean endings to prevent law enforcement interference. The room fell silent as the full horror of what Tyler was describing sank in. Robert's face had gone completely pale, and I could see him struggling to comprehend how close we had come to losing everything, including our lives. That's when you decided to escalate your demands, I said, beginning to understand Tyler's desperate strategy. Tyler nodded. I knew you had been suspicious of my behavior for months. I hoped that if I pushed hard enough, you would finally take action to protect yourself. I couldn't warn you directly, because they were monitoring my communications, but I could create a situation where you would have to defend yourself. You wanted to get arrested, Robert said, realization dawning in his voice. It was the only way to get police protection for the family, while providing evidence against Vincent's organization, Tyler confirmed. I knew Marcus had been documenting everything, and I hoped he was smart enough to involve law enforcement. Tyler reached into his other pocket and pulled out a small notebook with pages covered in his handwriting. I kept detailed records of every meeting, every conversation, every instruction they gave me. I was planning to turn it over to police, but I needed to time it so they couldn't hurt you first. Agent Wells had mentioned that Tyler's cooperation was providing valuable evidence, but seeing the notebook revealed the extent of his documentation. Pages of names, dates, locations, and descriptions of criminal activities that would prove invaluable for prosecuting the entire organization. This contains everything, I asked, flipping through pages of detailed observations. Every crime they committed, every family they targeted, every method they used to manipulate people like me, Tyler replied. I started keeping records when I realized I might be the only witness who could expose their entire operation. Robert took the notebook and read several pages, his expression shifting between horror and admiration for Tyler's courage in gathering evidence while under constant threat. Tyler, this information could have gotten you killed if they had discovered it, Robert said. I know, Tyler replied. But watching them plan to murder my family was worse than being afraid for my own life. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't do everything possible to stop them. The visiting time was nearly over, but Tyler had one more revelation that would completely change how we understood his actions over the past months. Marcus, there's something else you need to know, Tyler said urgently. Vincent's organization has been targeting inheritance recipients across 5 states. Your case helped law enforcement identify a pattern that's going to save dozens of other families from what almost happened to us. As we prepared to leave, Tyler stood and looked directly at both Robert and me. I know I destroyed your trust and put you in terrible danger. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't deserve another chance. But I want you to know that helping stop Vincent D'Angelo's organization is the first good thing I've accomplished in years. Walking out of the detention center, Robert and I both felt emotionally drained, but also strangely hopeful. Tyler's genuine remorse and his courage in gathering evidence against the criminal organization suggested that somewhere beneath the addiction and poor choices, the brother and son we remembered still existed. But we still had no idea how Tyler's cooperation would ultimately impact the broader investigation, or what it would mean for our family's future. 2 weeks later, Agent Wells requested a meeting that would reveal the full scope of Tyler's cooperation and its impact on the federal investigation. She arrived at our house, accompanied by U.S. Attorney Michael Chen, whose presence indicated the significance of what they were about to share. Tyler's notebook and testimony have provided evidence that extends far beyond Vincent D'Angelo's local operation, Agent Wells began. We've identified connections to organized financial crimes spanning 12 states and involving over 200 victims. U.S. Attorney Chen spread a map across our kitchen table, marked with red pins, indicating locations where similar family harvesting operations had been conducted. The pattern revealed a sophisticated criminal network that had been operating for nearly 5 years, generating millions of dollars through systematic targeting of inherited wealth. Tyler's documentation helped us trace the organizational structure, Chen explained. What we initially thought was a regional operation is actually part of a national criminal enterprise, with connections to money laundering, identity theft, and organized violence. The investigation had expanded to include federal agencies, across multiple jurisdictions. Tyler's willingness to testify had provided prosecutors with insider knowledge of recruitment techniques, operational methods, and leadership hierarchies that would have taken years to develop through external investigation. Tyler has agreed to participate in a comprehensive cooperation agreement. Agent Wells continued. In exchange for his complete testimony and continued assistance with ongoing investigations, the federal prosecutors are recommending a reduced sentence of 3 to 5 years with supervised rehabilitation programs. Robert looked up from the map, his expression mixing relief with continued concern for Tyler's safety. What about protective custody? If this organization is as large as you're describing, won't Tyler be at risk in federal prison? Tyler will be housed in a minimum security facility with enhanced monitoring, Chen replied. Additionally, his cooperation has led to arrests that have significantly disrupted the organization's ability to retaliate against witnesses. Agent Wells opened another folder containing photographs of arrest scenes from across the country. Vincent D'Angelo and 15 associates had been taken into custody in coordinated raids that seized over $3 million in stolen assets, sophisticated computer equipment, and detailed files on hundreds of potential victims. Tyler's notebook contained operational details that allowed us to identify and warn 43 families who were in various stages of being targeted, she explained. His information quite literally saved lives and prevented millions of dollars in additional theft. The scope of Tyler's cooperation extended beyond simply providing evidence. He had agreed to participate in educational programs designed to help other families recognize and avoid financial manipulation tactics. His first-hand experience with recruitment and operational methods made him uniquely qualified to help prevent similar situations. Tyler has expressed strong interest in using his experience to help other addiction recovery programs address financial vulnerability, Chen said. His testimony has already been instrumental in developing new educational materials for families dealing with gambling addiction. Robert asked about the status of our family's financial recovery. Agent Wells explained that asset forfeiture proceedings had recovered most of the money stolen from Robert's business, and federal restitution programs would provide additional compensation for documented losses. The trust protections Marcus established preserved his inheritance completely, she continued. Additionally, Tyler's cooperation qualifies your family for federal victim assistance programs that will help with legal costs and financial counseling. More importantly, Tyler's evidence had exposed the psychological manipulation techniques used by criminal organizations to recruit vulnerable family members. His detailed descriptions of how seemingly innocent gambling assistance evolved into systematic family betrayal provided insights that would help law enforcement identify similar operations in the future. Tyler's case has become a model for understanding how addiction creates vulnerability to criminal recruitment, Chen explained. His willingness to document and expose these methods will protect countless other families from similar exploitation. Agent Wells shared letters Tyler had written to other inmates participating in addiction recovery programs. His descriptions of how criminal organizations exploit family relationships and financial desperation had already helped several people recognize and report suspicious recruitment attempts. Tyler understands that his recovery requires complete honesty about his actions and their consequences, she said. His testimony demonstrates genuine remorse and a commitment to making amends through continued cooperation with law enforcement. The meeting concluded with information about Tyler's scheduled release timeline and post-incarceration supervision requirements. He would participate in intensive addiction counseling, financial responsibility, education, and community service programs specifically related to fraud prevention and family financial safety. Tyler will remain on federal supervision for 3 years after his release, Chen explained. During that time, he'll be required to participate in educational outreach programs and maintain regular contact with financial crimes investigators. Robert asked if we would be able to maintain contact with Tyler during his incarceration. Agent Wells confirmed that supervised visits and correspondence would be allowed, and that family support was considered beneficial for his rehabilitation and continued cooperation. Tyler specifically requested that we encourage family contact, she said. He believes that maintaining relationships with you and Marcus is essential for his recovery and his ability to make meaningful amends for his actions. As the law enforcement officers prepared to leave, Chen handed me a certificate of appreciation from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, recognizing my cooperation in the investigation that dismantled Vincent D'Angelo's criminal organization. Your willingness to document financial abuse and work with federal investigators prevented multiple murders and protected dozens of families from financial devastation, he said. Tyler's cooperation was crucial, but your initial evidence and strategic thinking made the entire investigation possible. After they left, Robert and I sat quietly in the kitchen, processing the magnitude of what Tyler's cooperation had accomplished. The brother, who had nearly destroyed our family through his association with criminals, had ultimately become the key witness in protecting hundreds of other families from similar destruction. Marcus. Robert said finally, I think I'm beginning to understand what your mother meant when she said protecting the family sometimes requires making difficult choices. Tyler made the most difficult choice of all, I replied. He chose to risk his own life to save ours, even after he had already put us in danger. 6 months later, Emma and I visited Tyler at the minimum security federal facility, where he was serving his sentence. The change in his appearance and demeanor was remarkable. He had gained healthy weight, his eyes were clear and focused, and his voice carried a sincerity that had been absent for years. The hardest part isn't being in prison, Tyler told us during the visit. It's living with the knowledge of how much I hurt the people I love most. But the counseling here is helping me understand that the best way to honor that regret is to spend the rest of my life helping other families avoid what I put ours through. Tyler had become a mentor in the facility's addiction recovery program and was working on a book about financial manipulation tactics used by criminal organizations. His first-hand experience and detailed documentation were providing valuable insights for both law enforcement and addiction counselors. I've received letters from 12 families who avoided criminal recruitment because they recognized the warning signs after reading about my case. Tyler continued, knowing that my mistakes might prevent other people from experiencing what I put you through gives my life meaning again. Emma, who had initially been skeptical about Tyler's transformation, found herself moved by his genuine commitment to rehabilitation and service. You're doing important work here, Tyler. The educational materials you've helped develop are already being used in addiction treatment centers across the country. Tyler's cooperation had indeed become a cornerstone of federal efforts to combat family financial abuse. His testimony led to convictions that resulted in over 30 years of combined prison sentences for members of Vincent D'Angelo's organization, and his documentation helped recover over $4 million for victim families. The prosecutor told me last week that my cooperation prevented an estimated 12 murders. Tyler said quietly. Vincent's organization was planning to expand their clean ending strategy to eliminate witnesses from previous operations. The arrests happened just in time to save those families. As we prepared to leave, Tyler asked Robert and me to consider participating in a family reconciliation program offered by the federal facility. The program was designed to help families heal from the trauma of financial abuse while maintaining appropriate boundaries and realistic expectations. I don't expect you to forgive me or trust me the way you did before, Tyler said. But I hope we can build something new that honors Mom's memory and protects the family bonds that matter most. Walking back to the car, Robert and I both felt a cautious optimism about Tyler's transformation and the possibility of rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and accountability. 1 year after that Christmas Eve confrontation that changed everything, Robert and I found ourselves preparing for Tyler's release from federal prison. The minimum security facility had become a place of genuine transformation, where Tyler's participation in addiction recovery programs and victim advocacy work had earned him early release for exceptional cooperation with ongoing federal investigations. Emma and I had gotten engaged 6 months earlier, and she insisted on accompanying us to pick up Tyler from the correctional facility. Her psychology background and experience with family trauma had helped our entire family navigate the complex process of rebuilding trust while maintaining healthy boundaries. "Are you ready for this?" Emma asked as we drove through the industrial area surrounding the federal facility. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her brown eyes reflected both compassion and cautious optimism about Tyler's release. "I think so," I replied honestly. Tyler's letters have shown real growth, and the counselors say his commitment to rehabilitation is genuine. But rebuilding trust is going to take time. Robert sat quietly in the passenger seat, his weathered hands folded in his lap, as he stared out at the gray November landscape. His relationship with Tyler had undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. The guilt and enabling behavior that had characterized their interactions for years had been replaced by something healthier: love combined with firm boundaries and realistic expectations. "I keep thinking about what Linda would say about all this," Robert said finally. "She always believed people could change if they were willing to do the hard work. I think she would be proud of how Tyler faced the consequences of his actions." Tyler emerged from the facility, carrying a single duffel bag and wearing civilian clothes that hung loose on his frame. 3 years of intensive counseling education and genuine accountability had changed him in ways that went far beyond physical appearance. His posture was straighter, his eyes were clear and focused, and his smile carried none of the manipulative charm that had characterized his pre-incarceration behavior. "Thank you for coming," Tyler said simply as he approached our car. There was no dramatic emotional display, no attempt to minimize the gravity of what had happened, just genuine gratitude and quiet dignity. The drive back to town was filled with comfortable conversation about Tyler's plans for rebuilding his life. He had secured a position with a nonprofit organization that provided financial literacy education to families affected by addiction work that would allow him to use his experience constructively while maintaining the community service requirements of his supervised release. The organization helps families recognize manipulation tactics and develop protection strategies, Tyler explained. "My job is to share my story with people who might be vulnerable to similar recruitment by criminal organizations." Agent Wells had visited Tyler multiple times during his incarceration, and her reports consistently praised his continued cooperation with federal investigators. Tyler's testimony had been instrumental in prosecuting additional members of Vincent D'Angelo's network, and his educational work had helped dozens of families avoid financial exploitation. Tyler's case has become a template for how addiction recovery can be combined with victim advocacy, Agent Wells had told us during her final visit. His willingness to accept full responsibility for his actions while using his experience to protect others represents the best possible outcome for this type of situation. Tyler's supervised release included several conditions that he accepted without complaint. He would live in a halfway house for 6 months while establishing his employment and community service commitments. All financial activities would be monitored by federal probation officers, and he would participate in ongoing addiction counseling and family therapy programs. "The structure is helpful," Tyler said when I asked about the supervision requirements. "After years of making impulsive decisions that hurt everyone I cared about, having external accountability helps me stay focused on making amends through consistent, positive actions." Robert had sold his construction business and was now working as a project manager for a larger company, a change that provided him with steady income while eliminating the financial vulnerabilities that Tyler's criminal associates had exploited. The transition had been emotionally difficult, but ultimately liberating. "I realized I was trying to build something to leave to my sons," Robert explained, "but I lost sight of the more important job of raising sons worthy of an inheritance." Emma had completed her psychology degree and was now working as a counselor specializing in family financial abuse. Her thesis research, which focused on the psychological dynamics of family financial exploitation, had been influenced by our experience and was already being cited by other researchers in the field. Understanding how criminal organizations exploit family loyalty and guilt has helped me develop therapeutic interventions for other families dealing with similar situations, Emma told Tyler. Your willingness to document and share your experience has contributed to healing for people you've never even met. Tyler's response to that information was characteristic of his transformation. Instead of taking credit or minimizing his responsibility, he focused on the ongoing work needed to help other families. Every family that avoids what we went through makes the suffering worthwhile, he said. But it doesn't erase the damage I caused or eliminate my responsibility to continue making amends. My software development business had grown significantly over the past year, partly due to contracts for developing security systems that help financial institutions identify and prevent family financial abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me that Tyler's criminal activities had ultimately led to career opportunities focused on protecting other families from similar exploitation. Marcus has created applications that flag suspicious account activities and identify patterns consistent with family financial manipulation, Emma explained to Tyler. Banks are using his software to protect customers who might be vulnerable to the kind of recruitment you experienced. Tyler listened with genuine interest, but without seeking personal validation for his indirect contribution to the project's success. His focus remained on his own responsibility for making amends and his commitment to using his experience constructively. The halfway house where Tyler would be living was a converted Victorian mansion in a quiet residential neighborhood home to 12 men working to rebuild their lives after federal incarceration. The facility emphasized education, community service, and gradual reintegration into independent living. Everyone here is dealing with the consequences of choices that hurt other people, Tyler said, as we toured his simple but comfortable room. The difference is that some of us are genuinely committed to changing, while others are just going through the motions. The staff is good at identifying which is which. Tyler's roommate was a man named David Martinez, a former accountant who had embezzled money from charitable organizations to fund a gambling addiction. Their shared experience with addiction and financial crimes had created a mutual support relationship focused on accountability and genuine rehabilitation. David helps me stay honest about my motivations, Tyler explained. When I start feeling sorry for myself or minimizing my responsibility, he reminds me that real recovery requires complete honesty about the harm we caused. As Christmas approached, our family faced the challenge of creating new traditions that honored our healing process while acknowledging the changed dynamics of our relationships. Emma suggested hosting Christmas dinner at the halfway house, allowing Tyler to participate while maintaining the structured environment that supported his recovery. I think Mom would like the idea of Christmas being about service to others rather than just family gathering, Tyler said when we proposed the plan. She always said the holidays should remind us of what we're grateful for and how we can help people who are struggling. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the confrontation that exposed Tyler's involvement with criminals, our family gathered in the halfway house common room with 11 other men working to rebuild their lives. Emma had coordinated with the facility staff to prepare a traditional holiday meal, and several volunteers from local community organizations joined us. The evening was quiet and meaningful, marked by stories of redemption, gratitude for second chances, and commitment to using past mistakes as motivation for positive change. Tyler spoke briefly about his experience and the importance of family support during recovery, but his focus remained on serving others rather than seeking attention for his own transformation. A year ago, I was helping criminals plan to destroy my family, Tyler said during the informal sharing time. Tonight, I'm surrounded by people who understand that real change requires accepting complete responsibility for our actions, while working every day to make amends through service to others. Robert and I both recognized the brother and son we had missed for so many years. Not the manipulative charmer who had preceded his criminal involvement, but a mature man, committed to honesty, accountability, and meaningful contribution to his community. As the evening wound down, Tyler pulled me aside for a private conversation that would stay with me for years to come. Marcus, I want you to know that protecting the family's financial security was the smartest and most courageous thing you've ever done, he said quietly. I put you in an impossible position, and you found a way to save all of us, while giving me the opportunity to become someone worthy of being your brother again. We all made choices, I replied. You chose to accept responsibility and use your experience to help others. That took more courage than anything I did. Tyler shook his head. What I did took desperation and guilt. What you did took wisdom and love. There's a difference, and I'm grateful you were strong enough to make the hard choice when I couldn't. 6 months later, Tyler successfully transitioned from the halfway house to independent living in a small apartment near his work with the nonprofit organization. His continued cooperation with federal investigators had helped prosecute additional criminal operations, and his educational work was expanding to include speaking at law enforcement conferences about recruitment tactics used by financial crime organizations. Emma and I were married in a simple ceremony, attended by Robert Tyler and close friends who had supported us through the difficult process of rebuilding our family relationships. Tyler's wedding gift was a handwritten letter expressing his gratitude for our willingness to maintain hope for his rehabilitation and his commitment to being the brother I deserved. Robert had begun dating Margaret Sullivan, a woman he met in the grief counseling group he joined to process Linda's death and the trauma of Tyler's betrayal. Margaret was a retired teacher whose husband had died 2 years earlier, and her practical wisdom and gentle strength provided Robert with the emotional support he needed to continue his own healing process. Margaret helps me remember that loving someone doesn't mean enabling their destructive behavior, Robert told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. Linda tried to teach me that lesson, but I wasn't ready to learn it until I saw how close I came to losing both my sons. As I write this story today, Tyler has been successfully living independently for 18 months. His work with families affected by addiction and financial abuse has expanded to include consultation with federal agencies, developing prevention programs. He maintains regular contact with our family while respecting the boundaries necessary for everyone's continued healing. The lesson that emerged from our family's crisis wasn't just about protecting financial assets or recognizing criminal manipulation. It was about the difference between loving someone and enabling their destructive behavior, between family loyalty and family sacrifice, and between forgiveness and foolishness. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their self-destruction. Sometimes protecting your family requires making choices that feel like betrayal, but are actually acts of profound love. And sometimes the people who hurt us most are also capable of the greatest transformation if we're willing to maintain hope while establishing firm boundaries. Tyler's journey from criminal accomplice to victim advocate taught our entire family that redemption is possible, but only through complete acceptance of responsibility and genuine commitment to making amends through service to others. His willingness to risk his own life to gather evidence against the criminal organization that exploited his addiction ultimately saved not just our family, but dozens of others who were being targeted by the same network. Today, when I think about that Christmas Eve confrontation that changed everything, I'm grateful for the wisdom my mother Linda gave me about protecting what matters most. Her inheritance wasn't just money. It was the responsibility to make choices based on love rather than guilt, wisdom rather than emotion, and long-term healing rather than short-term peace. The trust protections we established didn't just preserve financial assets. They preserved our family's opportunity for genuine reconciliation based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. Tyler's criminal choices created a crisis that forced all of us to examine our relationships and decide what kind of family we wanted to be going forward. Robert learned to love without enabling. I learned to protect without abandoning. And Tyler learned to make amends without expecting forgiveness. Together, we discovered that real family bonds are strong enough to survive truth, wise enough to establish boundaries, and loving enough to support genuine change. Emma and I are expecting our first child next spring, and Tyler has asked if he can begin saving money for the baby's college fund. His offer represents everything our family has learned about the difference between entitlement and responsibility, between taking and giving, between using family relationships and honoring them. I think Linda would be proud of the family we've become. Not perfect, but honest. Not naive, but hopeful. Not enabling, but loving. The inheritance she left me wasn't just financial security. It was the wisdom to protect what matters most, and the courage to make difficult choices with love rather than fear. If you've ever faced a situation where someone you love was asking you to enable their destructive behavior, I want you to know that setting boundaries isn't betrayal. It's love. If you've ever been manipulated into believing that family loyalty requires financial sacrifice, remember that real love protects rather than exploits. And if you've ever wondered whether someone can truly change after making terrible choices, Tyler's journey proves that redemption is possible through complete accountability and genuine service to others. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and family protection? How do you balance love with boundaries when dealing with addiction or manipulation in your own family? Thank you for listening to our story. I hope it helps you recognize that sometimes the most loving choice is also the most difficult one, and that protecting what matters most sometimes requires the courage to say no to people we love. Please share this story with anyone who might be facing similar challenges, and remember that seeking help isn't betrayal. It's wisdom. Like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and comment below with your own experiences of balancing family loyalty with necessary boundaries. Together, we can help each other make choices based on love and wisdom rather than guilt and fear.